Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 69. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and thank you so much for joining me this week. Today, we are talking about sales. And in the legal industry, we call this business development. We don't call it sales, but that's how we're going to break it down today. We're going to talk about it in terms of marketing and sales because both of those fall under the business development umbrella and both are important. And so once we get that defined, we're going to move into how do you sell without being salesy? Because I often hear people say, I love being a lawyer, but I hate business development. I hate trying to go out and get the work. I just want to do a really good job and be paid for that. And I think part of the reason why is we have so many stories in our head. We have so many fears that just aren't real. And so I want to unpack that today. I want to address what this fear is and why we avoid sales at all costs. So even if you are not in a law firm, let's say you are in-house. Maybe you work for a governmental agency or somewhere else. Here's the thing. Even though you don't have to develop business, you do have to sell. Everyone is selling all of the time. If you listen to any of Zig Ziglar's training on sales, or if you just have seen his quotes, he always points out, and it's correct, that we're all selling all the time. We are persuading others to adopt our point of view so that we can get something we want. And we don't really call that sales, but it's the exact same thing. So even though we're going to talk about this in the context of business development, I do think you'll still get benefit from it because when you are trying to pitch your idea, or you're trying to get a promotion, or you're trying to get a raise, or you're trying to convince your business partner to adopt what you're asking of them, that's both going to protect the company and accomplish the goals that they have, you are selling. That's what it is. You're selling. So you're going to get benefit from this episode as well. So let's dig in and let's start with this entire concept of marketing and sales under the business development umbrella. I'm not really sure what the history is, how we even came up with this term business development. I don't know if it's unique to law or others, but I will tell you this. Now that I have my own business and I interact with a lot of business owners completely unrelated to the law, right? I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs. I go to a lot of conferences. I do trainings with others not in the legal area. And you start talking about business development and they're not really sure what you're talking about. It's like, is it professional development, personal development? What is business development? Is that just helping your team get better? And then when you say, oh no, it's sales, or you say, oh no, it's marketing, they're like, oh, okay, so why don't you call it that? And I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why we don't call it sales and marketing, but for the most part, we don't. And when we call it marketing, oftentimes we're not talking about marketing. We're talking about sales or sales and marketing. We lump these terms together. And, words are important. And I think that lawyers care about words and how we define things. So that's where we have to start. In the business world, there are two separate and distinct departments and divisions for sales and marketing. Now, I'm sure there's a firm out there that has that, but I don't know the firm. Oftentimes, again, they just call it business development or they just call it marketing. And they really just leave it up to the lawyers to handle the sales, which again is not a really good business idea, but it's where we are. So that's what we're going to deal with. And I never understood this concept myself until I started my business and until I started having conversations with people and doing a lot more, just reading and training around this stuff. I had no idea that it was actually a separate thing. And, I dealt with sales departments and marketing departments in the work that I did, especially as an IP attorney, but it never occurred to me that they were different and treated very differently and oftentimes run by very different people. They don't communicate well. They like to blame each other. So let's break this down. Okay, marketing. Marketing can be direct or indirect. Indirect marketing is mostly related to your brand. So it's just brand awareness. Even having a brand, having colors, having a stylized logo, that is indirect marketing because you're not marketing anything in particular, but you're trying to create an awareness within the consumer's mind as to who you are. So that when they see those colors, when they see that logo, it means something to them. They have a feeling. They connect it with who you are and what you do and what you stand for. Now, the more common marketing is direct marketing, and that is marketing for a particular product or service. So, for example, when you see an ad on the television, or you receive an email from a retailer about a very particular product or sale that they're having, that is direct marketing. They're asking you to consider not just the brand, but a very specific thing that they want you to go buy. In the legal world, you don't see much direct marketing. Now, there could be some examples, but for the most part, it's indirect. So when you think about how you even see this show up, let's say that there is an advertisement in a magazine, and this happens, right? You see a legal magazine and there are a lot of ads in there from law firms, but they're generally not specific to a particular service or even practice industry. Again, it just goes back to the building a brand. So there's some kind of tagline, everybody says, we care about you, we think about you, we're innovative. It's all the same stuff, right? And there's an ad. It's building brand awareness, but it's not saying we have the best corporate attorneys or the best M&A attorneys. It's not even specific. It's not come check out our flat fee service related to trademark applications, right? It's just general. And so then you also think about, well, how do law firms spend their money? Well, sometimes it's with sponsorships. So they might sponsor an event and it might be completely unrelated to the law. It might just be a community activity. And so in that sense, it's kind of indirect marketing. It might be considered a charitable donation, however you really want to look at it. But again, it's just building that brand awareness. It's about goodwill. Lawyers also like to host CLEs or host events where their clients can come in and get training. They might even go speak or write an article. And we think of this as business development. It is a form of marketing, but it's indirect in the sense that you're not ending it with any kind of pitch. You're not trying to say, come hire us for this specific reason. Now, you might, if you do your event well, if it's maybe sponsored by a particular practice group, and maybe you have some materials at the end about what that practice group can do for you, that would be an example of direct marketing. But for the most part, it's indirect. And it's harder to have a conversion, which means have someone hire you with indirect marketing, but it's really what we do in the legal industry. And I have some thoughts on that. It's part of what we're going to move into, but we try to be very subtle. We have really high billable rates and we like to make a lot of money, but we want to be really subtle in the way that we tell people that's what we want. When the whole world knows that's what we're doing and that's what we want, for some reason we think we can trick everybody by being very subtle in our approach. But I don't even think it's really trying to trick people. I think it has more to do with the insecurities that lawyers have. And of course, that then moves into every business department, including marketing and business development. So that's really what it is. And so if your business development team, if they're really putting on events, if they're helping you with speaking and articles and doing research related to promoting your brand generally, that's marketing. So what exactly is sales? Sales is actually going out and speaking to someone to try to get them to hire you. Now, this is direct, okay? You can't go speak in front of an audience in a CLE and call that sales unless you specifically asked for people to buy your services at the end. And I've never seen that. I'm sure it's happened, right? Maybe somewhere, but that's not generally how that works. So sales means also not that you're just going to lunch with people. It means that you're asking for the sale at the end of the lunch. You're asking them to hire you. And that rarely happens as well. So sales, that can be email, it can be a phone call, it can be in person, but you are asking for the sale. You are asking for them to buy your services. If you're doing a pitch, right? Let's say there was an RFP. That's the one example where I think it's super obvious that that's what you're doing. That is clearly sales, and people feel comfortable with it because they filled out, an application, a process, were selected to come in and do this dog and pony show. And so it's generally not too uncomfortable because everyone knows that that's what you're doing. So it feels like, okay, they're not going to be offended if I'm trying to sell something to them because they asked me to come in and sell something to them. Outside of that, I think lawyers really struggle with this concept of selling, and they may think they're selling, but they're really just marketing. So again, if you are in person or you're on the phone or you're doing emails and you are just networking or you are just building relationships, I would suggest that that is indirect marketing, which is why it's not as effective if you're not actually asking for the business. Okay, so now that we have the differences down between marketing and sales, let's talk about why sales are so important and how this is how you're going to grow your book of business. If you want more revenue, you need to be focusing on sales, not marketing. I often see people start out or their business is struggling and they start to look at marketing. They're like, oh, how can we do ads? How can we just create something where we're in front of people? That has a very low conversion rate from the perspective of just like a cold, just someone just sees it and reaches out and it's a good fit. You're going to have a much higher likelihood of getting the business in the door by focusing on sales, which requires those one-on-one conversations and it requires asking for the business. And here's where you are probably getting a little anxious. Your chest might be getting a little tight and you're like, oh my God, this is why I hate this. This is why I hate sales. This is why I don't know that I want to be an equity partner because I don't like that part. So why is that? Why is that we have such a visceral reaction to sales? And that's why this podcast episode is called How Do You Sell Without Being Salesy? Because our connotation of sales is negative. We think it's a bad thing. It's a negative thing. And part of that is, I think, our culture. And when I say culture, I mean, society at large, the way that you were raised, and the legal culture. It's just not commonplace to really, one, even get training in sales, two, to see it modeled. And, I guarantee if you've gone to lunches and dinners with other people, it may not have come up. You've not seen it done in action, and so you're not really sure what it should look like. And it really puts our insecurities in the spotlight. And so that's the real issue. And so we have to address that if we want to avoid being salesy. Because here's the thing. If you don't want to be salesy, then don't. It's really that simple. Don't be icky. Don't be slimy. Don't try to trick someone. Be authentic and come from a place of giving and helping. Think about what you hate about the typical salesman in your mind that you don't want to be like. And then just don't do that. Seriously, it really is that simple. It is not the sales that bothers you. It is not the sales that is really keeping you from moving forward. It is your fear. It is the story that you have created in your mind about yourself. It is not even about the client. It is about you. So let's talk about that a little bit. What are the fears? If you ask someone for business, right? So I just want you to think about going into a lunch, a dinner, a networking event, anything where you then ask for the business. You specifically ask for the business. Now, keep in mind, there is a process to selling, and you don't just walk up to people and ask for their business. That's not an effective way of selling. But if you have been building that relationship, and if you truly are trying to close a prospect, at some point you do have to ask for the sale. Well, you don't have to. The indirect marketing might work. Again, the conversions aren't that high there. They're much higher when you ask for the work. But so assuming that you do that, assuming you ask, how does that make you feel? Now, I don't know about you, but here are some of my thoughts around that. One is I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid they're going to say no. Like, it's not the end of the world, but they may say no. And because as lawyers, what we're selling is basically ourselves, right? We're selling our own services. We're not selling a widget. We're selling our expertise. When you get a no, it feels like a personal rejection. It feels like they're saying, you're not good enough for me. Maybe you don't feel that way, but I do. It's one of my blocks to sales. It is this fear of rejection. The other, and it's connected, is a fear of failure. I like to excel. I like to succeed. And so when you're a lawyer and you're doing the legal work, when you're doing your briefs and your research and your depositions, and, if you're one of the rare people that actually get to go into court and try a case, the fear of failure might be there, but not so much, because you're doing a great job. You know that you're advocating for the client. You're putting your all out there. You're being zealous. And if you fail, it's, just because you can't win every case. It's not because you're not good enough. Well, when you're trying to sell something, if someone says no, and they say no over and over again, not just one person, but lots of people, it's like, I'm not really good at this. I suck at selling. And then it just gets you down and out, because we like to get gold stars. We like to really, just excel in everything we do. And the problem with sales is, even when you're doing it right, the conversion rate just in general is not that high, because people say no for a million different reasons. The timing could be wrong. They may already like who they're working with. It may not have anything to do with you. It could be budgeting reasons. It could be like they just don't have time to even think about it. Like, it could be a good time, but it's not a concern or priority for them. So when you know that you're not going to get as many yeses as you want, you can just feel like you're not very good at it. And, we don't like that. I don't like that. So that's another one of my issues. Another one, and this is kind of related to people pleasing. I don't want to bother others, right? I don't want to impose on them. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to feel awkward. It's like, I don't want them to be in the weird position to have to say yes or no. I don't want to bother them. Do any of you feel that way? I mean, and I personally think that might be the biggest one. I do hear that one a lot from clients. And, part of that is just, we want everyone to like us, and we don't want to be perceived in a certain light. And so that keeps us from asking for the sale. And then the last one that I have, a fear that might come up when you're trying to sell, is being a fraud. feeling like you're an imposter. And so because what you're selling is yourself, if you don't think that you're really that good at what you do, or if you feel like your billable rate is not really justified, it can make it really hard to ask for that sale, because then you kind of do feel like you're tricking them, right? Because you're like, I'm not even that good. You probably really shouldn't pay me. So those are the big fears that come up: fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of upsetting or bothering someone, and fear of maybe being found out for being a fraud or an imposter. So these are the reasons why we avoid sales at all costs, and we choose to focus more on marketing instead. It's easier. It feels more comfortable. Doing research and writing an article and getting it published and just doing an e-blast saying, hey, here's my article, getting on LinkedIn saying, hey, here's my article. It's not too hard. It's not too hard, but it doesn't work. It's not effective. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, but it needs to be a part of an overall plan as opposed to the way that you're allegedly developing business, because alone, it's not enough. You still have to have conversations, and you still have to ask for that business. Today's episode is sponsored by the Life and Law Planner, created with quality materials and designed specifically with attorneys in mind. It's not intended to replace your electronic calendar, but instead help you plan for reaching your personal and professional goals, as well as managing your caseload. Pre-order during the month of May, and you'll receive $275 worth of bonuses, including free shipping, printable templates, and free quarterly planning webinars. Pre-order your copy today at lifeandlawplanner.com. So how do we move past these fears? How do we go out and, sell without being salesy? Again, I've already pointed out that the truth is, just don't do those icky, scary, slimy things that you've seen others do. A lot of this, though, is just about changing your mindset. So let's kind of talk through what that looks like. One is, a true salesman is trying to provide someone else with value. It's either an even exchange, or the person that is buying, they actually get more out of it than they invested in it. Okay? So if you're trying to do this from a good place where you don't have to feel icky, then that's where you start. How can you make sure that what you are offering to a potential client is something where they're going to get an even exchange, or the value they're going to get actually exceeds what they're going to pay you? Now, some of your all's billable rates are crazy, and so you might struggle with this. And if that's the case, then what I want you to do is start to bullet point the value that you provide that doesn't really match up from a billable perspective. So for example, maybe, you provide great reports or detailed invoices. Maybe you have weekly planning calls with the client. Maybe you do fixed fees that allows companies to budget and grow when they're starting out. Maybe you are one of the best at what you do. And so you know that when they hire you, they're getting peace of mind. They can sleep better at night. Maybe you're really responsive. Maybe you are the kind of person that does the work on the weekends so they don't have to if they're in-house. And so the value is they get to spend more time with their kids and family because you're not. Whatever it is, but I want you to get creative when you're thinking about what it is that you provide. It could be a sense of security. It could be sleeping better at night. And how do you put a price tag on that? Right? So you've got to start to think about it a little bit broader than just, I file a summary judgment motion for X amount of dollars. The value might be beyond that. So if you can get comfortable with the fact that when someone pays you, they are getting the value that they're paying or even more value, if you can start with that, then you go to, what is the pain that this person has? Or what is it that they want? This still is true for a company. So companies are made up of individuals and they still have desires and wishes and goals that they're trying to achieve, or they've got things that are driving them crazy on a daily basis. So again, even if you're a big law attorney, this still counts. And it certainly counts if, you're a solo too. Where is the pain that your prospective client has? And do you have a service where you can help alleviate that pain? Or maybe it's not a pain, but it's something that they really want. And by working with you, you can provide them what they want. So maybe they can make more money. Maybe they can reduce their legal spend. Maybe they can reduce the amount of claims that are coming in, or even just the disruption within the company. A lot of times attorneys help with more than just the law. So whatever it is, what is the pain that they have? And if it's not a pain point, what is it that they're wanting? And so then think about it in terms of, well, how am I helping them in that regard? How am I helping to alleviate that pain, or how am I helping them get what they want? Now, if you know that you can help alleviate that pain or help them get what they want, why would you not offer it to them? I mean, isn't it really rude and selfish to keep that to yourself? I bet when you're talking to your friends and family, or even your clients, and something comes up completely unrelated to the law, I bet you make recommendations to them all the time. I bet you're selling all the time. You say, oh, well, have you heard of this? You should totally check it out. It's amazing. It's great. It's going to totally change your life. Here's how it's going to help. You need to go buy this. There is no difference in that and selling your legal services. When it's not about you, you're focused on them. You're focused on how it's going to help them. And you try to convince them to do it because you know how much it's going to help them. It's the exact same concept. If you know that your services can truly help someone, by not sharing that information with them, you're not giving them the opportunity to help themselves. Now, just like when you are referring someone to, a certain product or telling them they should try something out, you have no control over whether or not they're going to do it, right? They may not believe you. They may not see it as a big pain point, so they don't look into it. They may forget, but that has nothing to do with you, right? Like, that's not a personal rejection. Same thing with law. If you know that you can help someone and you put that out there and they choose not to follow through, that has nothing to do with you, but it's still your responsibility to share that with them. If you actually care about them and want to help them, then you would make that offer to them. So if you can change the perspective and stop looking at this as being about you, right? Because generally when you get into these sales conversations, you're like, what are they going to think about me? I'm trying to say, here's what I do. Here's what I offer. I would love to work with you. Look at it from their perspective. Talk to them about their pain points. Talk to them about what they're trying to accomplish. And if you're not the right fit, you better not be trying to sell them, right? Then it is being salesy. Then it is being icky. But if you know you can help them and you're focused on them and you're focused on trying to help them, then you can speak to them in those terms. And it's still scary, guys, because our ego is attached to it. But it's like public speaking or anything else. The more you do it, the easier it gets and the less fear is there. So you got to just start practicing having these conversations. But as soon as you catch yourself like sweating or getting anxious because you're like, feel like you're pitching yourself, stop, count to 3 and say, why am I doing this? Is this to help put money in my pocket, or am I truly trying to help them? And how can I make this conversation about them, right? Totally is going to change the dynamics for you. And if you're truly trying to help them, they're going to get that. That's going to come across as genuine and authentic. So even if they do say no or not now, then you know that they're not upset with you. You didn't bother them. That said, don't worry about that too much. That's the people pleasing, but I get that you do it. I do it. So I'm just giving you that tidbit. They're not going to be weirded out if you're coming from this genuine place of wanting to help. If you are trying to trick them, if you are trying to manipulate them, if you are trying to set them up to trick them and steal them and take their money and not provide them any value, then I agree. You are a greasy car salesman and you should stop it. But that's not who you are, and that is not what you do. No way. The greasy salesmen don't listen to my podcast. They just don't. So here's the thing. Know your intention. Know where you're coming from and know what you're trying to accomplish, which is not about you. It's about them. You are helping. You are providing a valuable solution. And if you focus your conversations from that perspective, it will not be seen as salesy at all. Okay, so that's it. Where are you stuck? Is it your fears? And what are those fears? Is it that you don't see value in what you're offering? Is it that you're focused on yourself and the actual sales tactics as opposed to simply helping and providing solutions? Or is it a combination, or perhaps even all of these things? It's super important to really dial in on what the issue is and start addressing it, because this is how you make money and it's how you help people. If this is something you struggle with and you ever want help, there are 3 different ways that I can help you on this. If you are an attorney and you just need some individual help, you can apply to spend a day with me. It's called a deep dive day. And I interview you. We talk about your strengths. We talk about your weaknesses, what you like, what you don't like, where the potential opportunities reside. And then I come up with a lot of different proposals. You give me feedback and we come up with what your plan is going to be. Marketing and sales, although I'm going to have you doing a lot of sales. And then I literally map out 52 weeks of what you need to be doing so you can just do the work and check it off. So if that sounds like a great idea, if you're like, I could really use that, just go to my website and check it out. heatherjoyhubbard.com. When you go to services, click on attorneys, you will see those options. Deep Dive Day is what that's called. If you are at a law firm and you think that your firm could use this help, if no one's really ever talked about sales or provided any sales training from the concept of having conversations to ask for business and not in a pitch setting, I do a workshop and it's about asking for business, and you can go to the website. Instead of going to attorneys, check firms, and there is a speaker request form there. I will give you a heads up. I only have 3 spots for the rest of the year. So if you think you're interested in that, you're going to want to request that sooner rather than later. And then last, for the AmLaw 100 firms, if this is something where you would really like to help women, minorities, underrepresented partners, I come in and do 9 to 12 month programs called Diversity Masterminds. And my goal is to help income partners that fit within those categories to become equity. And part of that is really giving them dialed in sales training support and doing it in a group environment with others in the firm. So if you are interested in that, that's also on the firm's page on my website. Again, heatherjoyhubbard.com. And it would be my honor to help and support you in developing your business in any of those 3 ways. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.